today's meditation, we are reading from Numbers chapter 32, verses 1 to 18. Now the people of Reuben and the people of Gad had a very great number of livestock. And they saw the land of Jazer and the land of Gilead. And behold, the place was a place for livestock. So the people of Gad and the people of Reuben came and said to Moses and to Eleazar the priest and to the chiefs of the congregation, Ataroth, Dibon, Jazer, Nimrah, Heshbon, Elilah, Sebam, Nebo, and beyond, the land that the Lord struck down before the congregation of Israel is a land for livestock, and your servants have livestock. And they said, if we have found favor in your sight, let this land be given to your servants for a possession. Do not take us across the Jordan. But Moses said to the people of Gad and to the people of Reuben, shall your brothers go to the war while you sit here? Why will you discourage the heart of the people of Israel from going over into the land that the Lord has given them? Your fathers did this when I sent them from Kadesh Barnea to see the land. For when they went up to the valley of Eshcol and saw the land, they discouraged the heart of the people of Israel from going into the land that the Lord had given them. And the Lord's anger was kindled on that day, and he swore, saying, surely none of the men who came up out of Egypt from 20 years old and upwards shall see the land that I swore to give to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob, because they have not wholly followed me, none except Caleb, the son of Jephunneh, and the Kenizzite, and Joshua, the son of Nun, for they have wholly followed the Lord. And the Lord's anger was kindled against Israel, and he made them wander in the wilderness 40 years, until all the generation that had done evil in the sight of the Lord had gone. And behold, you have risen in your father's place, a brood of sinful men, to increase still more the fierce anger of the Lord against Israel. For if you turn away from following him, he will again abandon them in the wilderness, and you will destroy all this people. Then they came near to him and said, we will build sheepfolds here for our livestock and cities for our little ones. But we will take up arms ready to go before the people of Israel until we have brought them to their place. And our little ones shall live in the fortified cities because of the inhabitants of the land. We will not return to our homes until each of the people of Israel had gained his inheritance. For some 400 years, the tribes of Israel had longed to go over the Jordan into Canaan. Now it seemed that the two tribes, Reuben and Gad, were content to stop short of crossing the Jordan and be satisfied with settling for less. Israel had conquered the Moabites and the Midianites, and the ideal grazing lands on the east side of the Jordan River were laid out before them. Seeing that the region was a place for livestock, the tribal leaders of the Reuben and Gad asked to be given them as their tribal inheritance. Here we see a crisis of blessing. All these years, Israelites were wandering in the wilderness. They had not found a place to settle in. But in the Transjordan region, these tribes found green pastures. So, finding exactly what you think you need may not be the best way to find God's will. Lot made a similar mistake when choosing to live in Sodom. We read in Genesis chapter 13, verse 10, and Lot lifted up his eyes and saw that the Jordan Valley was well watered everywhere, like the garden of the Lord, like the land of Egypt in the direction of Sodom. But he failed to consider the type of people living there. The text says in verse 13, now the men of Sodom were wicked, great sinners against the Lord. Here again, God had promised them to give the land beyond Jordan, but Reuben and Gad wanted to settle on the other side of the river because of the green pastures. They said to Moses, if you have found favor in your sight, let this land be given to your servants for a possession. Do not take us across the Jordan. This request was possible because the Lord had given Israel victory over the people who had earlier occupied these lush pastures. When ease and success seem just an arm's length away because of God's blessing on our lives, we often want to stop and settle there rather than finish our course to obtain what God has promised us. The most astonishing part of the story is the alarm and anger with which Moses makes this proposition. He instantly draws a parallel between them and the 10 spies who gave their gloomy report to the people 40 years ago. Your fathers did this when I sent them from Kadesh Barnea to see the land. Or when they went up to the valley of Eshcol and saw the land, they discouraged the heart of the people of Israel from going into the land that the Lord had given them. It is not only a personal matter, but also a discouragement to others when we do not press on to obtain the promises of God. Moses also reminds them that their fathers died in the wilderness over 40 weary years of wandering, simply because, in God's words, they have not wholly followed me, except for Joshua and Caleb. The lack of wholehearted faith and obedience grieves and angers God and deprives us of our inheritance. It is a great sin before Him. The sin of the 10 spies was that they discouraged the hearts of the people in fighting against the Canaanites and taking possession of what God had promised to their fathers. In fact, the people proposed to go back to Egypt. Here lies the danger. When we do not press forward, there is always a danger of going back to our old master, of serving sin again. But when these tribes saw the concern of Moses, they quickly agreed to fight along with their brothers. They said, our little ones, our lives, our livestock, and all our cattle shall remain there in the cities of Gilead, but your servants will pass over, every man who is armed for war, before the Lord to battle as the Lord orders. When Moses heard this, he agreed to their demand. But when the time for battle came, we understand from Joshua 4 and verse 13 that the tribes of Reuben and Gad and the half of the tribe of Manasseh, only 40,000 armed men passed over Jordan to assist their brethren in conquering of the land. Consequently, the number of 70,580 men were left behind for defense of the cities they had built, where they had placed their women, their children, and their flocks. The promise was, but your servants will pass over every man who is armed for war. But both Moses and Joshua took only the smaller number and were satisfied that they had fulfilled their pledge. God's people should be the first to show mercy and reason when expecting their brothers to fulfill their promises, rather than sticking to their claim even when it seriously injures their brothers. Yet this also shows us that we may make big promises for immediate gain, but in reality we always may have to go back on them. God may grant us our second best if we choose that rather than continuing to move on to the end. But we must always remember that His best is better for us than our best choices. Over his whole lifetime, Abraham wandered in the land that was promised to him. He had enough money to buy land and settle as Lot did. But he believed the promise of God and lived in tents along with the heirs of promise, Isaac and Jacob. We see the everlasting blessing on those who through faith and patience inherited the promises. It may be easy to choose between good and bad, but to discern between the better and the best needs a steadfast heart that follows the Lord's leading. Let us not settle for the second best and live on the fringes of the promise. Let us wholly follow the Lord and not be seduced by all that the world around offers us on our journey. Thus, we may be part of the final victory and settle down in God's rest. God bless.